walker. All right, here, excuse me. All right, come on. All right, come on. Take that beer away.
Oh, yeah. Harry, all right?
I've been seeing you in the market, too.
Next door.
Come on, mate.
Good to you. Thank you. Yes, you go there. Oh, that's fair.
He never ages. He never changes, really. Never.
Has he changed?
Oh, I changed.
You have not.
I'm fat now.
He is. He's that's what I'm looking for there.
So we changed.
Did your husband tell you that I was in love with him when I was a child?
No, he didn't know. Not very nice. He thinks he's still playing here.
No, you haven't seen it. You haven't seen that night. What did let him do?
Any chance I'm going back?
No, the ground soldier.
I should have given him a crown, all right.
Very good evening to you. All the sporting personalities that you're about to meet tonight all share the common distinction of having worn the green and white of the great Belfast Celtic. All were personalities in their own right. Several of them, in fact, achieved the status of legend in their own lifetimes. They have travelled from near and far, some in fact from across the Atlantic Ocean. The date, the 29th of May, 1949. The place, the Triborough Stadium, New York. The occasion, the greatest achievement by a club side in the annals of Football Association history. Here tonight, the members of that memorable side that achieved so much, led by their captain, Harry Walker.
I would say the best club that anyone could ever have played for. As soon as you went into Celtic Park, there's a homely feeling about it. You felt, I've come home. And when you start to play for Celtic, well, it got in the blood. Like, you're a Celtic player. Once a Celtic player, you're always a Celtic player.
Tommy Bud Ahern.
I don't think football in Northern Ireland will never be the same without Celtic. They could have gone to the first division in England, held the run.
Joe Douglas.
It was football, purely football in a sense, like, you know. One thing, religion, was never mentioned. It was taboo, more or less.
Jimmy Murdoch. Geordie Hazlitt. Guest player Mick O'Flanagan. Paddy Bonner.
Bless the meal that we are about to share. We make our prayer to Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
You were downtown, now, not weren't you?
Football, for most of us, is a form of life. It has its heroes, its villains, its triumphs, its tragedies. And it has its clubs which stand above all others. Belfast Celtic can be placed in that category. Every time I approach the end of the M1, I see the sign, Park, the name of the multi-purpose shopping complex built on the hallowed ground of Celtic Park. They say the ghosts of Celtic now parade there. Indeed, that part of the Donegal Road will forever be sacrosanct. It's paradise.
Belfast became a city in 1888. 3 years later, a football club was founded which was to have a special magic. Belfast Celtic.
I would have to say that the special magic about Belfast Celtic goes right into the core of the social structure of West Belfast. It was the poverty and the isolation of the people. The girls were working in the mills, standing up to their ankles in water in the flax mills. The men were unemployed. Times were very bad. Nobody took any notice of West Belfast. Nobody paid any attention to it. Nobody had any influence. And then suddenly we have a football team. It could as easily have been a cricket team or a boxer or something else, but it happened to be a football team who suddenly began grabbing the headlines. And the people in West Belfast were able to point across the street and say, "There's Jimmy McAlinden. He lives in my street."
It was incredible to see the crowds. Like the Celtic Park was packed, and when the trams were coming up the Falls Road, they were packed. The whole Falls Road was packed. It was hard to believe just the number of people that were going to Celtic matches.
Even in them days, I mean, the women and all talked about Celtic. I mean, it was all part of the life of the area and off the road. And as we're saying there, the different song, "It's a rare old team to play for," would have been sung in them days.
A week after the players' reunion dinner, several hundred supporters gathered at the Beachmount Leisure Centre on the Falls Road. They had come to watch Bill McCavanagh's slideshow on the history of the club.
You might easy know a daughter when she comes into town with her long yellow hair, her ringlets hanging down, with her lover tied before her and her fingers in her hand. You might easy know a daughter, for she'll never get a man. Oh, she'll never get a man. Oh, she'll never get a man.
The memory is fading now. The dream has almost ended. Like the faint mutter of the falling leaves, they now stir the occasional glimpse of the days that were and never will be again.
I learned my love for Celtic from my father, who was born in Serbia Street in the Lower Falls. He was an absolute Celtic fanatic. As a matter of fact, he wouldn't eat for a week after they were beat. He took it extremely seriously. And I came in later years to be much the same. I mean, it'd just destroy you if Celtic ever lost. Fortunately, that wasn't very often.
The Celtic Football Club was founded on the Falls Road in West Belfast at the close of the 1890-91 season as a member of the Junior Alliance. Their original colours, green and white vertical, gave them the nickname the Stripes. In 1896, they were promoted to the Irish Senior League.
When Celtic won the league championship for the first time in 1899-1900, years of depression and deprivation in Belfast, this tribute was paid to them in verse. Out of seeming nothing, out of shadow and gloom, out of a hollowed vacuum, came something to keep us in tune, something to interest and please us, something we call our own, loving beyond control, boys by practice and training, diligently keeping fit, man by planning and scheming built it bit by bit. Loyally working together, faithful to their scheme, out of little or nothing came the champion Celtic team.
In 1912, Belfast Celtic became the first Irish team to tour the continent. They played 6 games, won 5 and drew 1. It was also the first year of the Gold Cup competition, and Celtic won it by defeating Glentoran 2-0. Our photograph includes goalkeeper Oscar Traynor, later to become Minister of Defence in the early government of the Irish Free State.
I always thought it quite appropriate that a goalkeeper should have become Minister of Defence.
When Winston Churchill came to Belfast to speak in favour of Home Rule for Ireland in 1912, Celtic Park was the only large venue where he was permitted to hold a meeting. His motor car was attacked by Unionists as he left his hotel, but the rally went ahead without any further incidents.
Celtic was a club without creed or class. There were no isms about them. Religion had no part of it. Celtic existed purely for football and football only, and I think that was one of the reasons of their success.
I remember a gentleman saying to me one night, Pope head and all this, and I kicked the ball across and I lifted the ball and I said, if you don't keep your mouth shut, I'll stick one in the back of the net. No sooner said than done, I got the chance and at the back of the net it rattled. And the spectators looked on him. And he kept quiet for a while, and then he started shouting again. And I says, now I'll repeat the same thing again if you don't keep your mouth shut. I finished up the second, all the supporters got round the chest and moved the ground. He says, you're aggravating that bloody player, he says.
At work there, some of the boys, especially when we beat Linfield there, they like, we can long give milk and water promised me. But I'd say that really nothing there, only a wee bit of verbal abuse.
I can remember my first match actually walking along French Park Street, Broadway, up Donegal Road to Celtic Park. And I felt a wee bit like, well, I had been with Linfield and I wasn't too happy sort of style, but once I got in among the boys, like, right as rain, never looked behind me after.
Nobody cared what religion you were, in fact. As long as you could play football, you were welcome there.
How they got that atmosphere in such a mixed club is hard to understand.
Our wee team is a nice wee team, all in a row. Up came Mickey Hamill with the ball on his toe. He passed it through to Ferris, and Ferris put it through, and that was a goal for Celtic, and then the whistle blew. The significance of the song was this: Hamill was a local of the Falls Road.
He was transferred to Manchester United, and when the contract ran out, he returned to Belfast, returned to Celtic. But he wasn't there very long until Manchester City purchased him. And he was with them for a while and then came back to Celtic again.
Mickey Hamill was probably the George Best of the 20s. I wrote a series some time ago, and I interviewed the personalities who played with him around that period. And when I asked them who was their greatest ever Irish player, they unanimously said Mickey Hamill.
He had several international caps, and he probably could have picked his club anywhere to play. But Mickey had this tendency to become homesick. Couldn't stay away from Belfast too long.
In the 1920s, many families were driven from their houses as sectarian violence erupted again in Belfast. This followed partition and the setting up of the Northern Ireland state.
Celtic, aware that the sport could quickly degenerate into confrontation between rival groups of supporters, decided to withdraw from football. In 1924, they returned, and the clubs quickly realized that the trophies they had collected in Celtic's absence were merely on loan.
In 1926, he won the Irish Cup. He also won the Irish League in 1926. And they won it in 27, 28 and 29. Now, I think this is some going for a team that were only in existence for 2 years.
The second and fourth of these championships were won without a single defeat. In 3 seasons, they lost 1 match.
We beat the Reds, the Whites, the Blues, the Glens and Porrydown, Queen's Island 2 and Ards we slew, and we travelled to Newrytown. It was on the top of the table. We took the points from Larne and we travelled down to Carricktown and Wallop Old Barn. The stripes are on the ball, you know, so forth and so on. Those were great days.
I joined Belfast Celtic in 1927. The players in goals was Jack Diffin. The backs was myself and Bobby Ferguson. The half-backs was Billy Pollock, Sammy Moore, Eddie Inch. And the forward lines was two Mahoods, Sammy Corn, and I think Keeler McCulloch and Jackie McGrill.
And now the famous names begin to surface. Sammy Curran, the beloved Blind Sammy, one of the greatest strikers in Irish football history. As captain of the team, the towering figure of Derry-born Sammy Moore proved to be a worthy successor to the immortal Hamill.
Here was a club nurtured on idealism, on tradition, on honesty of purpose, just as those 11 founding fathers who created the club at 88 Falls Road envisaged.
Celtic's first ground was at Broadway on the Falls Road, opposite the Beehive Public House. They then moved to White Rock Road and played at Sean's Park, known locally as the Klondike, which was later to become McCrory Park. But in 1901, Celtic Park was built, and Belfast Celtic Football and Athletic Club was registered as a limited company.
The directors were people who would have had probably a secondary education and then went on into business. They were all businessmen or in the professional field.
Hugh McAlin was a bootmaker, but Hugh McAlin started his early days working in the mill and then progressed on to being a bootmaker. Bob Barr II was a schoolmaster in Raglan Street School before he took over the secretariatship. Austin Donnelly was related of the family of Joe Donnelly and Company, the solicitors. Austin worked in the solicitor's office.
My uncle, of course, was a doctor, as was Eddie McSorley, who was another director.
Davy McCluskey was what we would call maybe a traveller or a representative.
And between them they combined, I think, a pretty detailed knowledge of the whole fabric of life in Belfast and generally in this area.
They were all misters, not like perhaps today players may be calling directors by their Christian names.
I remember Austin Donnelly coming into the pavilion, probably Celtic got beat, and the referee maybe did give a bad decision, and the players would have been in the bath giving off about this. And I remember Austin being so strict. Austin would have been, "That's enough, no more. There's 11 of you, there's 11 of them." You know, and that was no argument or no discussion about this. And they run the club on strict lines.
There was a supporters club founded one time down around St. Peter's, and they wrote to Celtic and said that they had founded this supporters club and they were going to call it the Belfast Celtic Supporters Club. And they got a letter back from Bob Barr and said that Celtic had no objection to them founding a supporters club, but we want to make it perfectly clear to you that you have absolutely no voice in the running of this club. It seemed an extraordinary letter to send to a group of people upon whom you are depending for support.
The club gave those in the Falls area and beyond a belief in the future. Celtic had the support of the working man of West Belfast. He was involved. He carried the colours. He sang the songs of success.
Well, Celtic, you see, was an institution. It was born and made on the Falls Road. I mean, it was started off with the pounds of the ordinary people that gathered there and paid it sometimes at half a crown a week or half a crown a month until they made a pound share. So, therefore, Celtic was Falls Road and Falls Road was Celtic.
And can anyone talk about Celtic without naming Elisha Scott, or Lee as he was known to his players? What a personality, what a goalkeeper, the Black Panther, and a manager who brought to Celtic much of the style of Bill Shankly at Liverpool, Matt Busby at Manchester United, and Jock Stein at Glasgow Celtic.
Scott from the Donegal Road was one of Britain's greatest goalkeepers. He had played for Celtic during the Great War, then transferred to Liverpool. He came home as player-manager.
He began with working with the second 11, who were very successful, and began building them up. Now, of course, this was great for the club because here was a man who was working on local talent, building them up, able to sell them for very large amounts of money. He sold Davy Martin and Jackie Brown for $7,500 in 1934, an immense amount of money.
The first international I played, Scott was the goalkeeper. He was 42 and I think I was around about 17. That was the day we beat Wales. And he was brilliant. And he hadn't been playing very long because Breen had been hurt and Scott came out and filled the bill and then kept goals for Ireland after being retired for years.
It was said he was a professor of languages, but that'd be a certain type of language that he was a professor of.
There was all sorts of stories about Scott being mean. He was a mean man. He wouldn't even pay your penny in the tram going down the Donegal Road.
I never found him to be mean, even though I did write the brochure for the United States tour, and I'm still waiting on the cheque coming from them for that.
I also remember during the war for a period that Elisha Scott provided the players on a Thursday night with ham, eggs and soda bread and potato bread dipped, and a slice of cake afterwards, a fruit cake afterwards. And now Elisha Scott went out to the country and bought that stuff. You couldn't get, I mean, there was a wartime and you didn't have ration was on.
The late Hughie Kelly was our goalkeeper at the time, and he hadn't had a great game previously, and
he let a simple goal through him, like he took his eye off the ball and the ball bounced and just over it. So after the match, Scott came in, he says to him, he says, my bloody granny could have kept goals better than that.
When Thursday night come, Scott would have come in just about near the end of training and put the list on the board of the team for Saturday. And of course, Hugh Kelly was on the team.
When Hughie was going out that Thursday night to go home, he got a pen, scored his name off, and put Scott's granny on the team sheet.
This here is Scott's book. Now, this starts off in 1940. And this gives you all the matches right through to the end of the American tour, which was the end of Celtic playing in football, you know. I refer to Peter O'Connor when he scored the 11 goals in this book. And Peter O'Connor, 11 goals, a record and what have you. Scott just writes good. He just had a good game, along with all the rest of them.
He has 3 categories listed in which he rated the players after each game. There was good, fair and poor. There was never a very good. And excellent, I don't think Scott could have spelt the word.
He wasn't a man for giving praise, but he was always effective. And he got the best results, as proven by the record of Celtic in the years that he was managing them.
They won the league in 33, and 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. That was 5 years in succession. Now, Glasgow Celtic had won the Scottish League 6 years in succession, and I said, right, we're going to equal the Celtic's record, and we're going to beat it. But the Irish League was disbanded in 1940, and the Regional League was formed. But lo and behold, Celtic won it in 40-41. That was actually 7 years in succession they had won the league. Now, they also won the Irish Cup in 1937. We won it in 1938. We won it in 41 and 43, 44 and 47. As a matter of fact, during my period at Celtic of 17 years, we never lost an Irish Cup final to anyone.
And on the retirement of Sammy Moore, became the captain.
He just treated his players like pupils. Not in a nasty sort of way, but he could put things over to you that I never knew anybody could do it like him.
A man that I respected and looked up to, and I think he did me an awful lot of good in life by his example.
He was a brilliant player, and he could bring out every other player nearly up to his level.
In the Second World War, Belfast suffered greatly during the Blitz. The city was unprepared for the German bombs that fell in 1941 and for the serious damage and loss of life that was caused.
Well, I was stationed up at Macarrah in the RAF. We were on a mobile unit, just a small wireless unit. We used to look after ourselves, and at the time we were stationed in a vicarage in Macarrah, and there was a local publican, Matt Regan I think his name was, who said he knew Charlie Murphy, who was a second team manager at Celtic, and he said he'd tell me about me being up there because I was a Chelsea player at the time. And so I went down, and I was only 20 years of age, so I played in the reserves, and as I said tonight, my first game was at Larne, and Charlie Tully was playing. I think he was 16 years of age.
He was always referred to as Cheeky Charlie. I don't think he was referred to cheeky because of his attitude, but his attitude on the field. Charlie would have took a ball up and sat it beside you and said, like, come on, do you want to take it? And then slipped it past you.
When he was transferred to Celtic, he became immediately the idol of Glasgow, for he paralysed Rangers in the very first match he played.
Well, Tully, you see, at one time was on the ground staff of Belfast Celtic, even when he was playing for the club. But the story goes about Tully been out and the players been training, and he didn't seem to be doing very much. Again, there may have been a health problem, but Scott was referred to him then that he wasn't doing very much. Would he get that bucket of paint and that brush and go down, paint the goal, go out and paint them goalposts? And of course, Tully painted the goalposts, moved up the other end, painted the other goalposts. And when he had finished, he come in and he says to Uncle Lee, he says, I painted them goalposts there, that's both of them done, Mr. Scott. He says, well then, maybe when they're painted now, you'll know where they are on Saturday.
They invested very heavily in the ground. There was an agreement made at the founding of Celtic that there would never be any dividends paid to the shareholders until the ground improvements were completely clear and finished with.
From what I was told, that the soil, the topsoil on the pitch was brought from the top of the Divis Mountain. Now, what sort of soil I have up there, or whether there's any left, I don't want to sort of start a rush up the Divis Mountain for special soil, but it never was really bone hard in the summertime, or in the winter time was it never very soft.
It was certainly the best ground in this country, and Stanley Matthews, no less a man than Stanley Matthews, who had played all over the world, claimed it was the best pitch in the United Kingdom.
Windsor Park, home of Celtic's near neighbours and greatest rivals, Linfield. It was just across the bog meadows from Celtic Park. Unfortunately, games between the clubs were sometimes marred by civil disorder when passions gave way to violence.
Celtic and Linfield was, of course, the big needle match. Linfield had been founded earlier than Celtic. They did attract the Protestant community, but I must point out at this time that Linfield were certainly not a sectarian team. They had several Catholics on their books, as Celtic had several Protestants.
They were all cup finals. It doesn't matter if it was the first match of the league, it was still a cup final as far as the clubs were concerned.
You could rest assured there's 40 to 45,000 packed into Windsor Park every time we played them there at the Christmas holidays. The same when they came to Celtic Park.
The Celtic support was 90% Catholic, and some Protestants may have supported Belfast Celtic. I have yet to meet the Catholic that would have supported Linfield. There may be one somewhere, but I never met him.
We thought it'd be fitting on this occasion to make a presentation to somebody from Belfast Celtic to commemorate a great event. And when we spoke to the organisers, they felt that perhaps the greatest individual performance that has ever been done by a player from the team was by the gentleman who scored on one occasion 11 goals in a game. It really is my great privilege on behalf of Wilkinson Sword and all the sponsors and all the guests to make a presentation to Mr. Peter O'Connor.
From 1936, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, I was a leading scorer in the country. And the day I scored the 11 goals, 2 or 3 weeks after, they were picking a team to play against the South. They didn't pick me.
I just remember that every time Peter got the ball was stuck in the net. And then when Peter got a few up, everybody was pushing and pushing for Peter to get more and more.
They say that, but they didn't. Any goal I got it on my own. Well, now and then Norman would have passed a nice one to me.
Celtic were unquestionably the outstanding team in the north. They destroyed Distillery by 10 goals to 2. They demolished Linfield by 8 goals to 1 at Windsor Park in the County Antrim Shield.
Glentoran had got a good team. They were drawn against us in the Gold Cup at Celtic Park. Well, I heard for a couple of weeks ago much, God help you. God help you when we get you this time. So they came to Celtic Park, and it was a nice wet night. And we beat them 9-0. And all over East Belfast the next day, all you could see was 9 times round the glens for a bob.
I remember that day particularly well. The end of it, it was a day of infamy for Irish football, and it is one which is written into the history of it.
At the previous game in October at Celtic Park, there was an incident between Billy Simpson and Kevin McAleenan. Now, I got the impression was that going for a ball on the ground, that McAleenan had come in contact with Simpson's boot, diving for the ball, and he took a headache out of it. But anyway, whatever happened at that match, McAleenan wasn't a bit happy, and there was an incident just in the second half between McAleenan and Simpson. But the match went over. There was no great incident at the match on that particular day. But the letters started coming into Celtic Park then that McAleenan need not appear at Windsor Park on Boxing Day because he'd never got out of the ground.
So we played Ballymena the week before Linfield, and Kevin had a bit of a bad back. He didn't play against Ballymena. He said, if I play against Ballymena, I'll not be able to play at Windsor. He said, I'm playing at Windsor.
Being who he was, he couldn't afford to let the crowd put him off, so he went out on that particular day.
When Jimmy Jones and Bob Bryson were going for the ball, this was a 50-50 clash. Jimmy Jones came out top dog.
I heard the crack. I knew his leg was broken. But there was nothing intentional as far as I was concerned or anything like that.
It was a complete accident. Jimmy Jones and he went together for the ball. Now, Jimmy was only a lad of 20 years of age. He wouldn't know in the first thing how to hurt anyone. But he was a strong boy, and he went on, and unfortunately Bob got a broken leg.
Joe Mackey, the then Linfield secretary, he seemed to see fit to make an announcement over the public address system at half-time, which we didn't know anything about. We were in the dressing room. This announcement was that Bob Bryson had been taken to hospital with a broken leg.
But for a man in his position, he was superintendent of the cleansing department. No, he was no ordinary man about the street. For to make an announcement at half-time that Bob Bryson was away to hospital with a broken leg, it just put the match to the tinder that was there. About maybe 10 or 15 minutes or sometime during the match, near the end, Paddy Bonner and Albert Curry were put off for an incident in it. And as I say, at the match particularly, it was a moral victory for Linfield because they lost Bob Bryson, and still withal they ended up by scoring and drawing one each. But the crowd come on the pitch at that period of them scoring a goal.
Now, that, I believe, in any circles would be taken as a pretty good warning that further trouble might have been anticipated at the end of the game.
The final whistle, the Span Cup spectators came onto the ground. I knew they were going for Kevin, so I made for Kevin as quick as I could. I told all the players, once the whistle blows, head for Kevin, and we'll surround him to get him off. I made for Kevin anyhow. We were more or less cut off, but we managed to fight our way into the pavilion.
I was actually caught away on the other side of the ground, which I didn't think anything about it at the time, and I had shook hands with Alec Russell and Alfie McMichael, I think it was. I was just making my way normally off. I didn't think that I was in any danger whenever the whole crowd came on, mostly from the Span Cop end. And I did then see that there was a bit of aggression towards me, and the policemen had been standing around the ground during the match, around on the running track, and I thought that probably was still there, and I thought that was my best means of protection. So I headed over towards, but the police had all moved down to the players' entrance, and they were all lined up there, and I tried to run down the track, the running track, but the crowd just seemed to come over, and somebody pushed me, and I went over onto the terracing, got up on the terracing and started to run down the terracing, and then somebody kicked me, quite a violent kick, and then another fella, he jumped off the wall onto my leg, and I never thought if it had been broken. I knew it was very painful, but I had fallen at the time, and I got up for the run on and to try and get into the dressing room, and it was just like a piece of rubber. It just wasn't supporting any weight at all.
Sean McCann, I say, was the man that saved Jimmy Jones. He would have been worse probably if Sean McCann, he come out of the stand, threw himself on top of him.
And I was trying to fight him off too, and he just kept saying, "It's me, Jimmy, Sean McCann." And only for Sean, actually, it would have been, I don't think I'd have been speaking to you today. I think I owe my life to him.
We're all in the pavilion. A lot of us were in. When I looked at it, I said, "Where's Jimmy Jones?" And Jimmy wasn't there. So I can tell you, we collected brushes, shovelled, anything there that was handy. And we were going to back out onto the ground, the other 10 of us, when Jimmy was carried in.
Players had never been attacked before, you know. In anywhere in the world, had never been attacked before. You know, it was sad, really.
There wasn't a single arrest. The police didn't draw their batons. No Linfield stewards that people could see were available to provide any protection for the players. And of course, at the end of the day, Jones ends up unconscious, badly injured, with a broken leg, and all the parties responsible for that terrible affair simply washed their hands of it.
Linfield were fined. Their ground was also closed for a month. And Celtic weren't happy about that situation, that they'd got off so easy, especially after their secretary causing the problem by making the announcement.
The Celtic board were more than annoyed. As Austin Donnelly said afterwards, he said, "We can't let you boys put up with the like of that." He said, there's no way we can let that continue.
I met Jones the following day in the Royal Victoria Hospital in Belfast, and he had very little recollection of what happened. I think his main problem was that the leg fracture wouldn't heal up in sufficient time for him to be able to go on the United States tour. They went out in a blaze Days of Glory. They travelled across in the Mauritania to New York, a trip which took them 6 days, and they played against a number of local sides, including Ulster United, the standard of which wasn't very high.
As we thought, we'd have a few matches and a bit of a holiday. But we found when we got there that we had the matches all right, but there was no holiday because Alicia Scott made sure we kept fit.
I took homesick. And it was the most terrible feeling I ever had in my life. If I had been a guy there saying, like, I'll take you back to Belfast, I'd went on a plane or a boat back again.
Our first match when we were playing the American All-Stars, we didn't know then you paraded around the ground, but they told us, right, you have to parade. And Alicia Scott was in front of me, and someone handed Lee a tricolor. And I said, Alicia, you want us all shot when we go back to Belfast? But what can you do when someone hands you it? You can't leave it down. Alicia carried the tricolor around the ground.
There was nothing really wrong with this. You have to look at the American mentality. To the Americans, this is a team from Ireland.
There's a bit of an uproar about it here. I think there was a bit of a kick-up in some of the papers, but we didn't do anyone any harm.
The incident was blown up out of all proportions, and I lay the blame squarely on local politicians in Belfast at that time who wanted to make a lot of capital out of this particular thing. And they denounced it right, left and centre.
Then came this game against Scotland at the Triborough Stadium, and you've got to remember that Scotland at that time were British champions. They felt that this was just another match to them, the end of the tour.
We had travelled in the bus together to the match. There was plenty of talk on the way to it.
They'd won the championship, and we asked would we have their autographs. Not one of them would give the autographs, like, you know, where we were Minnesota style compared to them.
Just didn't know what was going to happen. I know personally we'll give them a match all right. But can we keep this score down? Now this is a strange attitude for me because I myself and the rest of the Celtic team, I didn't know there was such a word as defeat in the English language.
A myth been created that Johnny Campbell scored the both goals, but according to the book which Alicia Scott recorded on the tour, the second goal was scored by Alex Moore. So it's one of these great mysteries of football. Did the late Johnny Campbell score both goals, or did Alex Moore get the other one?
They dropped me off in the Limerick Junction, coming down from Dublin on the train, and they were going up to Dublin, and then they dropped me off at the Limerick Junction because I come from Limerick, you know, and as I got off, and they all waved out, so that was the last time, you know. And it was a sad moment, really.
They were waiting for us coming into JNR station. Everybody was showing the flag, you know, it's great to beat Scotland and America.
But suddenly, it was over. The board had made its decision. Celtic would never play in the Irish League again.
I think at that stage the directors realised that they weren't going to get protection from the IFA, who just simply, in effect, ignored the terribly serious implications of what had happened.
Some people allege that it wasn't the Jimmy Jones incident which was primarily responsible for Celtic leaving football. They thought that there were internecine strife among some of the directors.
There was one of the sons, I think, had 51% of the shares, and all the other directors had 49 amongst themselves. And I think, in my opinion, one of the sons said, well, if I don't become chairman, director here, there'll be no more football at Celtic Park. That's as far as what I heard.
Yes, Bob Barr died about 47. Yes, the Barrs wanted to get a son on the board. For some reason, the Celtic board did not want to accept him on the board. But Celtic went on. And if it was direct, as the saying goes, that the Barrs wanted to direct the club and get their money out, they waited an awful long time. They waited from 47 to 77 before the club was ever racked up. So it could not be that. It was because of the incident at Windsor Park on Boxing Day 1948.
There was total support from the supporters at that time. But in the back of everybody's mind was the feeling that this was going to be a very temporary thing, that Celtic were just telling the Irish Football Association, we are not going to put up with this. But everybody felt that compromises would be made and that Celtic would eventually be back.
The previous times they'd gone out, they'd only been out for a few years. And I would think that most of the players had it in their head, well, we'll give a few years and they'll be back again.
Celtic Park continued to be used as a greyhound track. In 1977, it was bought by bookmaker Sean Graham, who also failed to make greyhound racing a success. It was then acquired by a property developer.
From what I gather, the income from dogs did not pay them. And then the pressure was put on them that the bankers wanted their money. And I think then they were forced to sell Celtic Park.
Sometimes I take a wee detour and go up St James's Road rather than pass it. Many a tear came to my eye passing it, you know.
I'll never forget that in my lifetime, and they know that, because I don't think they had any right to sell Celtic Park. Celtic belonged to the people of Falls Road, not to any business people or anything like that.
They say, of course, that the ghosts of Belfast Celtic still hover there, and I know quite a few ardent Celtic fans who simply wouldn't visit the centre to shop.
I would not go into the park centre. I wouldn't put my foot in there.
That was the main entrance. When you look at it now, the cars, you say to yourself many a time you got a sore head running up and down that wing where those cars are parked now. That could have been made into a wonderful stadium for all people.
Okay, Stephen, now keep your eye on the ball. Okay, let's go. Seldom go to the Irish League matches now. I get a great kick out of watching my grandson Stephen playing. I suppose that's enough for me now.
For 58 years, ladies and gentlemen, they graced football in Ireland. To those of us who saw them play, we can count ourselves lucky. For those who didn't, well, I'm afraid you have to put up with poor imitations. All I can say too is that you missed a touch of greatness in sport. Celtic is a team that will never die. The name is part of the fabric of our society. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to rise as I propose the toast of Belfast Celtic.
You're still Belfast Celtic Football and Athletic Club. We're still registered. And the day could come. We could come back again.
When you read the history, it's enough to make your heart grow sad. For we don't care what the one is right or wrong. Down there we care. For we only know that there's